Follow-up on Laughing Jack. This is SkyWatchTV for Tuesday, November 24th, 2015. I'm Derek Gilbert. Yesterday, told you about an internet entity called Laughing Jack, allegedly induced a 12-year-old girl to stab her stepmother to death and then set her apartment on fire. As part of that story, told you about a rash of suicides and attempted suicides at the Pine Ridge Reservation in South Dakota. At least 15 people there have killed themselves so far this year. The reservation home to about 40,000 people. The suicide rate there, double the global average. On Friday, a spokesman for the Oglala Sioux said that the only suicide prevention outreach on the reservation would end in December due to lack of funding. The federal program, the grant that had supported the program for the last 3 years, was not renewed because of a problem with the application. The tribe is asking the government to reconsider, but at this point, there is no backup plan in place. I told you about Laughing Jack and Slender Man, who apparently inspired 3 attempted murders last year, teen and preteen girls that tried to kill their mothers. But there are other creepypasta characters out there. Now, the word creepypasta derives from the word copy pasta, kind of an internet word that means copy and paste, stories that were shared around the internet by copy and pasting and then sending it on via email. Because these are horror characters, horror stories, it's creepypasta instead of copy pasta. Well, it seems to me that we as parents and grandparents ought to be aware of this type of thing, especially because the Sci-Fi Television Network has given the green light to a new horror series based on creepypasta characters. They've already authorized 2 seasons of this program. I started researching a list of the popular creepypasta characters out there to share them with you, but changed my mind. Some of the more popular include characters like Jeff the Killer or the Russian Sleep Experiment. The images were just too disturbing to share. You can find them on the web if you want, but I would be prayed up before I did. Remember, Jesus told us that when we lust after someone we're not married to, we have committed adultery. It's not like adultery, it is adultery. When we hate someone, it's murder. Not like murder, it is murder. Now, the Lord told Noah and Moses multiple times that the shedding of human blood was absolutely forbidden, to the point that even when an animal shed human blood, a reckoning would be required from that animal. The blood is in the life, and apparently shedding human blood has some spiritual component that we don't fully understand, but it is forbidden. So, what are we doing when we fixate on horror films or stories that involve the shedding or consumption of human blood? I suspect that the popularity of these creepypasta characters is opening up a legion of internet followers to demonic oppression or possession. And no doubt skeptics who heard that sentence are now thinking that I've lost my mind. No, that's all well and good. But with stories coming out like the Wisconsin teens or preteen girls who tried to kill their mother to please Slender Man, the young girl in Indiana who's now currently being held by authorities, charged with stabbing her stepmother to death, and the rash of suicides and attempted suicides in South Dakota. I think the evidence is beginning to speak for itself. And because the internet is everywhere, handheld devices, tablets, as well as laptops, and we parents and grandparents will find it more and more difficult with each passing year to protect our children and grandchildren from these entities. In other news, Pepsi has released a new short film that's a bit hard to describe. It's called Black Knight Decoded. Comes across like a soft disclosure of E.T. existence and an updated version of the old Coca-Cola ad. I'd like to teach the world to sing, sort of a feel-good, all one world, it's a small world after all kind of thing. Here, let's watch this.
The NSA finds it, it'll never see the light of day.
They'd only come
If it were real.
Our friends are gonna help us find out what the message says. If this actually works, it'll change everything.
The Black Knight is allegedly a 13,000-year-old artificial satellite in polar orbit around the Earth. Nikola Tesla, in 1899, reportedly picked up signals from something out in space. Ham radio operators picked up a similar signal in the 1920s. Now, it's believed that they were hearing something, but that what they were hearing were pulsars, sources of pulsing rhythmic radio signals located out in deep space. It wasn't formally discovered until 1968. In 1954, it was disclosed that the U.S. Air Force was tracking a pair of satellites that they believed to be of artificial origin, orbiting the Earth at 400 and 600 miles up. They tasked the astronomer Clyde Tombaugh, who discovered the planet Pluto, with finding them. He never reported success, or at least not publicly. This image, probably the most startling piece of evidence in the Black Knight legend, myth, taken by the crew of the Space Shuttle Endeavour, mission STS-88. This is from 1987. They took a number of these high-resolution photos of this object, which for all the world looks like something artificial. And that's because it is. It's a space blanket that was lost during one of the space walks during that Endeavour mission. Silver on one side, black on the other, kind of folded up into a weird shape as it drifted away from the Endeavour. Now, how do I know that this photo is not, the story of the space blanket is not some NASA attempt to cover up the existence of this Black Knight satellite? Well, remember, the Black Knight supposedly orbits the Earth in a polar orbit. The Endeavour and other space shuttles, the International Space Station, are in a semi-equatorial orbit, which means they would not have been traveling in parallel lines. They would have been at cross, they basically, their paths would have crossed. And because they were in orbit, they would have crossed at a minimum of 7.9 kilometers per second, or about 17,500 miles per hour, which makes the existence of this photograph a miracle, if it's real, of the Black Knight, of course. Not likely that anybody from this Endeavour would have been able to capture even one picture of this, and certainly not multiple clear, high-resolution images of this blanket. So, in sum, the Black Knight is, we'll call it a UFO pasta. It is a conglomeration of a number of bits of data collected from various UFO stories over the last 100 years into one story. The Black Knight satellite is not real. But why would Pepsi then build on this to produce a 6-minute commercial, basically, and claim that it's real? Well, I shouldn't have to say this, but not everything on the internet that claims to be real is real. Not everything on TV or in the movies that claim to be real is real. You remember the film Fargo from 1996, opened with text on the screen saying that the events depicted in the film were true, but that the names had been changed to protect the survivors. Even the disclaimer at the end of that film, the one that says that no similarity to actual persons, living or dead, is intended or implied, wasn't enough to keep a young lady from Tokyo from traveling to Minnesota in 2001 and looking for the briefcase full of money that was buried in the snow by one of the characters in the movie. Sadly, the young lady froze to death near the town of Detroit Lakes, Minnesota. But anyway, the Black Knight satellite, it's not real. It's not sending signals to Earth. We are not being invited to join a galactic brotherhood. Why would Pepsi put together a film that says so? Well, marketing, for one. Secondly, perhaps just another attempt to prepare humans for the eventual disclosure of extraterrestrials. Now, for the record, we at SkyWatch TV know that we are not alone in the universe. It's just that the entities that are in contact with UFO experiencers and the mediums and channelers who claim that they're hearing from these entities aren't what those entities say they are. They've been here the whole time. Demons, fallen angels, that book they're carrying to serve man, it's a cookbook. The Satanic Temple has announced that it will offer protection to Muslim refugees in America who feel unsafe. Facebook posts last week from the chapters in San Jose and Minneapolis offered big dudes to escort Muslims to where they need to be. Now, there are a couple things to bear in mind whenever the news reports on the Satanic Temple. First of all, the guy who founded the Satanic Temple doesn't believe Satan actually exists. He's an atheist. Doug Mesner set up the group in 2012 mainly as a tool to make Christians look foolish. And sadly, there are those in the media who are all too happy to help him in his crusade. The Satanic Temple claims to have about 40,000 members around the country. Based on this photo from the Minneapolis chapter's last gathering, posted to Facebook, along with the note that said this is about double the normal turnout, I would guess that an estimate of 40,000 members around the country is probably a little high. Secondly, the press is always hungry for clickbait, and stories like this are made to encourage people to click on the link and help the online media outlet sell ads. The media, more than happy to take the press release from the Satanic Temple and run it, which makes the Satanic Temple, because of the press coverage, appear to be much larger than it actually is. Now, do I believe that there are actual Satanists at work out there trying to manipulate spiritual forces for dark purposes? Absolutely, yes. But they're probably not on Facebook. Ironically, Mr. Mesner and his friends, who themselves are, who don't believe in the existence of Satan, are themselves useful idiots for powers and principalities that they don't believe are real. This does raise an important question, however. How do we balance our faith in Christ, faith in God, with due diligence in offering sanctuary to refugees from the violence in the Middle East? I mean, after all, don't we trust in God? Don't we trust in Christ as our protection? People other than the Satanic Temple are also using this line of logic to throw stones at Christians reluctant to open their doors to unrestricted immigration from violent places around the world. One prominent science fiction author who publishes a blog with a fairly large following used the parable of the Good Samaritan to try to shame Christians into welcoming refugees without question. Well, the Good Samaritan did, in fact, help a man in need. In fact, he helped someone who had been ignored by men who were so busy being righteous that they were of no earthly good to someone who was in desperate need. But remember, the Good Samaritan paid an innkeeper to tend to the needs of the injured man. And maybe that is a solution that we should really seriously discuss with one of our allies. In Saudi Arabia, there is a city of 100,000 air-conditioned tents that can accommodate up to 3 million people. Those tents are only used 5 days a year during the Hajj, the pilgrimage that Muslims must make to the city of Mecca. Those tents are unoccupied 360 days a year. Perhaps we could accommodate some refugees in those tents. Culturally, there would probably be less trouble assimilating into Saudi Arabia. Religiously, less conflict in a Muslim nation with accepting Muslim refugees. But the Saudis aren't interested. Being prudent, this is my point, isn't being faithless. We are dealing with an organization here in the Islamic State that that has no regard for human life, not even their own. They've been very open about this, about using the refugee crisis to infiltrate Europe and North America. Let me give an example of a biblical example of trusting in the Lord while also being prudently prepared. Chapter 4, the book of Nehemiah, when Zerubbabel went back to Jerusalem to rebuild the temple at the command of the Persian king Cyrus. Nehemiah directed the reconstruction of the walls of Jerusalem. And we read in chapter 4 of Nehemiah, when Sanballat and Tobiah and the Arabs and the Ammonites and the Ashdodites heard that the repairing of the walls of Jerusalem was going forward and that the breaches were beginning to be closed, they were very angry. And they all plotted together to come and fight against Jerusalem and to cause confusion in it. So in the lowest parts of the space behind the wall, in open places, I stationed the people by their clans with their swords, their spears, and their bows. And I looked and arose and said to the nobles and to the officials and to the rest of the people, do not be afraid of them. Remember the Lord, who is great and awesome, and fight for your brothers, your sons, your daughters, your wives, and your homes. You can read more in chapter 4 of Nehemiah, but I think that's enough to get the point. Being prudent is not being faithless. I'm not suggesting in any way that we close our doors to those in need. Certainly, if I were a resident of that part of the world, I'd want nothing more than a peaceful place to live my life with my wife, raise my children, grandchildren in peace and security. We get that. But we know, again, we're dealing with an enemy that seeks to exploit this opportunity for its own gain. I heard an illustration last night. This is not original to me, but this makes the point, I think, very well. Say you've got a bowl full of M&Ms, 10,000 M&Ms, and you're told that 0.1% of those M&Ms, 10 pieces, only 10 out of 10,000, contain a powerful poison strong enough to kill or permanently disable anyone who ate even just one piece. Knowing that's the case, that out of that bowl of 10,000 M&Ms, there were 10 that could potentially kill or disable, how many M&Ms do you let your children eat? Again, don't mistake my point. I'm not saying we should absolutely close our borders. I'm just suggesting that being prudent and thorough is not being faithless. There is a new religion that's growing. It is the one world religion we call Mystery Babylon. And secret societies have been working for generations to make it a reality. Tonight on SkyWatch TV, we discuss that with the authors of the new book, The Babylon Code. Paul McGuire and Troy Anderson join us on SkyWatch TV tonight, 9:30 p.m. Eastern Time and 8:30 p.m. Central Time on the Christian Television Network. That's DirecTV Channel 376, Dish Network Channel 267, Glory Star Satellite Channel 117, and streams live to the internet at the website of the Christian Television Network, ctnonline.com. If you miss it tonight, you'll see it later this week at the SkyWatch TV channels on Roku and on YouTube. Still a few places left for the 2016 Rocky Mountain International Conference. If you're looking to register, do it quickly. 24, well, actually more than 24 top speakers on the fields of geopolitics and Bible prophecy gather in Colorado Springs July 14th through the 17th of 2016. And there is still space for you, but again, it's limited to the first 1,000 registrants, and it is at least 3/4 sold out at this point. You'll find more information and registration online at prophecywatchers.com. Every now and again, the ideas inside my head rattle around and come out on the internet, and you can follow those here, Twitter, Facebook, and my website. And of course, my email is open for your comments, questions, and suggestions. That's dgilbert@skywatchtv.com. Thank you for watching as we keep watch. I'm Derek Gilbert, and this is SkyWatch TV.